Good evening, and welcome to another episode of The Fire Caves, a Star Trek Deep Space Nine podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Perry.
And I'm your host, David. Tonight we're talking about Season 5, Episode 13, For the Uniform. Before we continue, you can find us on Facebook, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, and X as The Fire Caves, a Star Trek Deep Space Nine podcast.
Absolutely, and as I say every single week, you should find us, you should follow us because we're awesome. This is probably the best time you're gonna have. Now I say bar none on a Star Trek Deep Space Nine dedicated podcast. Screw the other one. I like those guys. Don't get me wrong, but I feel like sometimes you just you want to get into the core of the thing and talk about the show itself and not every single behind the scenes bit. And this is what we give you. Okay, it's a lot of analysis of the episode, good, bads, highs and lows. You just can't beat it. And with tonight's episode in particular, you're going to get a lot of that. This is a fantastic one. So obviously, I guess you can tell I'm really excited to get into this one. But of course, before we do all that, I'd like to check in. So David, how has your week been?
Week's been good. It's funny. All this week it's been dead at work, and then today it was busy, and it was like great, making sales, making money. This is exactly good. It's weird when it's slow and I'm busy doing other things. It's more of like a pain to have someone come in because, like, hey, I was doing something else. I didn't expect to be one because it's been dead all day. But when you're busy, like, you're happy to see people because it's like it's been busy. It's, oh, there's another person. Like, I'm already in the zone. So like, oh, hey, someone else. So that was good. That was nice. This week I finished The White Pill, which is a book about the history of the Soviet Union in particular, which was interesting because I haven't ever really studied much about the Soviet Union, and it was really interesting because it covers basically 100 years of the history of the Soviet Union, everything from Lenin's rise and Stalin's stuff, and then just all the terrible, police state nonsense that they were trying to do to control their population. Very interesting book, really enjoyed it, and then started Band of Brothers because now that the new show Masters of the Air is coming out soon, wanted to read this first before reading that and then seeing the show. And as you mentioned recently, you'd recently rewatched the show. I plan on rewatching it here after reading the book. So good. Just one of the best shows ever.
Yeah, man. If you haven't seen it, go watch it. I mean,
exactly.
It's amazing.
It really is.
I know you. I mean, like, there's so much I could say about it, and I mean that could be a whole show in and of itself. But
it should.
Yeah, absolutely, go watch it. And the crazy thing about it is, like, even if you have watched it, if you want more of that, there's so much extra stuff that didn't get put into Band of Brothers that now you can find on like YouTube and Max and so forth. That's just little extra bits, especially stuff with Captain Winters,
Yes.
There's so much about the guy. And as I said before, when we talked about it, he's probably as close as we'll get to like a real life, like, hero action star. Like, you watch it and you think, oh, they probably stretched the truth here. They eliminate. No, they didn't. Like, he did those things. Mm-hmm. And then you can listen to him tell his story in his own voice, the man himself. And it's just as riveting. I've watched several of them now. I kind of went, into this weird Band of Brothers spiral there for a minute. And I mean, he's a great storyteller too. On top of everything else that the man is, he's a great storyteller too. So yeah, go watch it, man.
I know that there are copies of interviews he's done, but I've never actually looked into them before. So yeah, once I get done reading the book, I'll be happy to do that as well. Mm-hmm. It's fun reading the book because I've seen the show so many times that like I can see the scene as I'm reading it, but it's fun to get like the authentic account and then compares it in my head to the real thing, which is the show in my head, because again, that's what I've seen. And to know that actually maybe things, little details are a little bit different, or like the names, like Buck Compton. I know who Buck Compton is in my head, but like, who's the real guy? What does he actually look like? That kind of thing. Yeah. So fun stuff. Great show, great book so far. The other thing I was thinking about this week, there's two things, I guess, actually. First off, have you heard of the book, The 3-Body Problem?
Actually, I just heard about it. It popped up on a recommended reading list for me. And and like literally all I saw was just like the name, and I was just like, I feel like I'd heard about this before I'd even seen it, but I didn't know anything about it. So yeah, it's popped up on my little, recommended reading thing
Right.
through Amazon, and I was thinking about getting it, but I don't
Yes.
know anything about it. Have you read it? Do you have it?
I don't have it. I actually thought about buying it today, but when I went to the bookstore before coming home to record, it's funny. I went there last night just because I was perusing. I was thinking, do I want anything? I was thinking about this book because the reason I was thinking about it is because Netflix is making a show based on this book. This book, The Three Body Problem, is based on a book by a Chinese author. It won a bunch of awards, really popular very recently. And I wasn't sure if I was interested in it, but then like there was an announcement. It's a Netflix show. Like the trailer dropped
Maybe
a few
that's
days
why I'd
ago.
heard about it was the
Yeah,
announcement of the show, because it popped up and I was like, that sounds familiar.
right.
And but I was like, maybe we just talked about the book in passing, because we discussed a lot of books.
Yes.
And so I just thought maybe we had talked about it in passing, and that's why it seemed familiar to me. But maybe that's what it was. I heard the announcement and didn't
Hmm.
realize, the connection.
Yeah, the trailer is really interesting. It's being produced by the same two guys who did the Game of Thrones books, Dan and Dave. I don't remember the last names at the moment, but that was like the big tagline. It's like by the guys who brought you Game of Thrones.
Oh,
Like
so Netflix gets a Game of Thrones, eh? You
exactly, and
know,
it's the trailer was really well done. I was really intrigued. But what's funny though is when I heard about this book at some point in the
wait.
last year.
Are these the guys that did like season one Game of Thrones or season eight Game of Thrones? Because like
Well,
there's a reason.
well, to be fair, they were in charge the whole time, so they were doing most
Oh,
of the end. So
okay.
that is a very good point. How much are they just bringing the book
Mm,
to screen versus trying to fill in gaps? Because that's what was the problem with the last seasons of Game of Thrones is there weren't any books anymore to base the show on. They were having to kind of go with it as they thought maybe the plot would continue, and that just didn't work by the end. But anyway, the reason I bring it up is because I want to read the book before the show comes out because I'm thinking, hey, I like this. Is what I like to do. I like to read the book before the show. But the show comes out in March, I think March 21st, so that's
okay.
still about 2 months away. And I was part of the reason I bring that up is because you and I had talked about reading The Count of Monte Cristo, and so I was thinking in order to give you a head start. Like I won't read the Count of Monte Cristo until probably sometime in mid-February. Start it, so they'll give you if you want to join me in reading that again, you can read
Yeah.
that.
Okay.
Um, and then basically with the reading plan I have in mind with the books I have, by the time I finish the Count of Monte Cristo with my reading plan, I could then read the Three Body Problem and then be done with the Three Body Problem book in time for the show to come out. Which I think is always fun to like finish
Yeah.
it day of and be like, now I know like all the plot elements. Now I can watch the show.
Understand.
So that's my
Okay.
thought. Do you still want to
Yeah.
do the Count of Monte Cristo? I know you
Yeah,
just
I do.
moved, so you didn't have time for that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. So I was gonna say, for my week, we did just kind of finish up all of that stuff. So we're done. Now it's just like cleanup of the old place because it's an apartment, so we got to do that part.
Right.
Hopefully I get to do it. As you know, we have like potentially winter apocalypse 3.0 bearing down on us this evening.
Hmm.
It's January 13th. So by the time you guys hear this episode, we'll already be a week into it. So it's either going to be nothing or it's going to be terrible, depending on who you
Right.
talk to. And it's all supposed to be hitting, sometime around tonight into this morning. It's winter cyclone vortex. I've heard so many different meteorological terms for whatever it is that's about to descend upon us, and of course I've been out in the stores and it's total chaos everywhere you go. So I hate that. I hate going into overly crowded like grocery stores and whatever else. And of
Right.
course with things like this, you can't avoid it.
Right.
So no matter what time you go, no matter how you plan, it was a mess. Um, but I did get everything I needed to do, take care of for that. We've been preparing, so we're good to go here. I hope
Good.
that you're good to go where you are.
Pretty well. I mean,
Okay.
I don't think this is going to be snow apocalypse again, but
Yeah, I'm
yeah.
hoping not. And then if everything holds pretty steady, then I'll go back one or two more times and finish out the sweep and whatever, and then be done.
Right.
My lease over there is officially up on the 31st, so there's still plenty of time. I just don't
Right.
want to be hit with like a dumpage of snow and ice, and then I can't drive. So,
Right.
there's that.
Yeah.
Speaking of day of things and being excited for them and everything else, if you have followed along, have you ever heard of a series called True Detective?
Yeah. I watched the first season. Yeah.
Okay, and you with Matthew McConaughey and
Woody Harrelson.
Woody Harrelson.
Yeah.
It was a phenomenal season.
Creepy as hell. That
Oh
last the
yeah,
finale. Woo-hoo.
yeah. Season two wasn't bad, but it wasn't as great as season one. I think that's kind of globally agreed upon.
That's why I never
And
watched it. I heard it wasn't as good as the
yeah,
first season, and I was like, all right, I'll
well,
give it a pass then. But
now they're coming back with season three, and it actually is supposed to drop tomorrow, the 14th. And apparently, if I'm picking up the right message from the promos that they've been showing, this is a continuation of an overarching storyline that has been running since season one. I did not
oh,
realize that when I watched season two. And I think it's because there's such a disconnect in the way they present season two. It takes you a bit to realize that it is sort of loose, it is loosely related to season one, but now they're coming back and they're really leaning into the story and continuing it out in this new iteration. So I'm really excited for that. I've been going back and kind of like picking a couple of episodes here and there to watch in order to
right.
be ready for the next one. It looks great. I like the casting. I like Jodie Foster. I think she's going to do a great job in this. I can't think of anything I've ever seen her in that I didn't think she did a great job in. She really hasn't been, to me, it feels like anyway, she hasn't really been active in a while. So I don't know if this is a kind of a return for her or what.
Right.
But I'm really excited to see it. And I really hope that it does do justice and kind of, brings things up and kind of restores the level that they were at with season one. Because I mean, man, did they just hit it out of the park with that first season.
Right.
But yeah, it looks really good. It looks really interesting. I like the what we're seeing so far, and of
Right.
course, I'll be watching that when it drops.
Gotcha.
I've also been watching the show, both Jack Ryan and Reacher, which are on Amazon.
Hmm.
All of Jack Reacher, or not Jack Reacher,
Jack
all of
Ryan.
Jack Ryan is out, but Reacher, they're doing kind of like a once a week thing, which I don't know if I like that or not. I guess I'm
You
very
prefer
much
the
used
the
to
binge
the
dump?
binge culture. Yeah. So there's that, in addition to, whenever I have time to, move things around and work and my kid and everything else, I just, little pockets of watching these things or reading something or whatever. I have not started the sixth book. I've been kind of holding off as I've obviously been working through a lot of other things.
Mhm.
There's that. Also, before we actually get into this episode, really quick, excuse me, next week we will be releasing our After Dark episode where we talked about Star Trek First Contact. So for those of you who knew that was coming and still haven't seen it yet, I do apologize. I was trying to figure out a proper time when to release it, and we've just had so many other things going on that just really didn't seem like it was the right time to do that. But I'm going to go ahead and do that and have that out for everybody next week. The week after that, we will announce our contest winner. So remember, you had to write the key phrase in a comment on the last three videos that we did for
Mhm.
YouTube. We'll announce our winner the week after that. So that'll put us into February. And then, of course, we will have our After Dark for Nemesis Games.
Mhm.
So lots of stuff coming up that we're
Yeah.
giving you here. And I hope
Yeah.
you stick with us for all
Yeah.
of it.
Yeah.
And
I'm halfway through rewatching season 5 right now.
see,
Um,
it's
yeah.
addicting, man. I actually got my brother-in-law has finally agreed to
Give it
read
a
the
go.
books as well.
Oh,
He's
give the
gonna,
books a go.
yeah.
Okay.
I
Yeah.
told him I had to lay it all out for him. I was like, man, they're great books. They turned it into a show. It's a fantastic show. But don't watch the show. Read the books first and everything else. Found the books for him. He's doing audio book. So
Fair enough.
got all that. Yeah, got all that taken care of. And I'm like, yeah, just do it, and you're gonna love it. And when you're done, I'll take you to the show.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I'm still
So
trying to get my parents to watch it. I know that.
Yeah,
I mean, I will say again for anyone who remembers me saying anything, season one of the show for me it didn't quite jive. It wasn't until season two that I really got into it, and so I feel like I need to like mention that to people. Like season one takes, frankly, it's a little bit rocky because they have the problem of the first season is that the team doesn't gel yet. It's not
yeah.
until season two that they start gelling as a group, which is interesting because that's the first season of the show. I'm talking too much. First season of the show is the first half of the first book, and then it's by the end of the second book, or sorry, the beginning of the first season when they finish the first book, where they get to start gelling
Yeah.
as a group. And
Well,
anyway,
I think that there's so much that they want you to really kind of fall in love with the character of Miller in the first go, and it's kind of hard to get into that character without a book background because I found the character way more enjoyable in the book than I did
in the show,
in the
yeah,
show.
you're able to get
Um,
into his head in the book.
yeah,
You can't do that in the show. So yeah.
yeah. But we're not here to talk about all that, at least not yet. We are here tonight to talk about For the Uniform.
Mhm.
And as always, a way to describe this episode is I'm going to say dynamic. It's fantastic. Everything about this one was just, to me, just great. We'll get into it, of course, but yes, I'm going to go with the word dynamic for this one. And
Go for
would
it.
you, okay, I was going to say, I was going to do it. I was going to do it. All right. It seems like these episodes, especially with when it features Cisco, it is a favorite of mine. It ends up with me being the one to do it.
Of
But
course, yeah, for sure.
so this episode starts with we see Cisco in out of his uniform. He's in plain clothes, and apparently, in order to denote that they're like on, a spy mission, Star Trek has decided that everybody has to wear a vest. If you look at all of Trek, anytime they're not in a uniform and they're in espionage clothes, they're wearing some kind of stupid
What's
vest.
that man doing wearing a vest? He's a spy.
Yes. Oh, he he must be doing
You're totally
reconnaissance.
right.
Yeah, it's
Because
awful. Everyone
first
does it.
contact in first contact, Jonathan Frakes, Commander Riker,
Yes,
he's got a vest on, baby.
he's
You're
got a
totally right.
vest. He wears a vest. They all do it, and they have been doing it since like forever. So I don't know what that is, but that's Trek for
Picard, all
spy
of
or
them
undercover. Yes.
are.
So he's looking for somebody. He's looking for a contact. They're in some kind of cave or underground dwelling, something. He gets the nod that the guy he's looking for is behind the curtain, goes behind the curtain. No one's there. All of a sudden, Klingon phaser drops out of the side, pointed at his head. Turns out it's Michael Eddington. Eddington is back. And so we find out that Cisco has been on his trail for the past 8 months, trying to hunt him down. And he's basically giving Cisco the ultimatum. You leave us alone, we'll leave you alone. We don't have a problem with the Federation. We just have a problem with the Cardassians. This doesn't obviously sit well with Cisco, who feels personally betrayed by Eddington. And Eddington beams out, and then he follows hot in pursuit on the Defiant. They go to try to track him down, but of course it's like not really him, and or something like that. I forget, but not really important. Basically, they don't get him in that instance in the Badlands. They then try to keep tracking him. They head towards the Badlands. Eddington has too great of a lead on them, so they're not going to be able to catch him up right away. He contacts the ship called the Malinche to try to head him off. Eddington, realizing that the Malinche is going to try to close in on them, he turns around, comes back towards the Defiant, and he enacts some bit of sabotage that he had planted on the Defiant a while back, which wipes out all of its systems. And then he contacts them via a new bit of technology that we haven't seen before, the holographic communicator, which allows you, instead of having to watch everybody up on a giant view screen, makes it look like they're right there in the comfort of your own bridge. And basically he tells them what he's done, and that they're going to have to head back to to Deep Space Nine to get everything fixed.
Yeah.
The Malinche tows the Defiant back to Deep Space Nine. Chief O'Brien tells him it's going to take, like, what does he say, 2 weeks?
2 weeks
to fix
mm-hmm.
to fix everything that Eddington messed up.
Mm-hmm.
And they also get a briefing from Odo and Worf. And Odo has a nice little snippet where he's basically saying, hey, remember when Starfleet stationed old Eddington here because y'all didn't trust me? Yeah, who's sitting pretty now? Like basically that's what he's doing, you know. And it's a great little moment, you
It
know.
is.
And
Yeah.
so they all leave, and then the captain from the Malinche comes in, and he informs Cisco that Starfleet has tasked him now with tracking down Eddington, and that he's been taken off the case.
Right.
This does not sit well with their captain. And as a brief aside, is Cisco, he's like either really tall or this captain is really short, because they were standing and they were, you know, the face to face thing, and Cisco was just like kind of towering over the guy. And I knew that Avery
The
Brooks was
camera
kind
angle
of
helps,
tall.
but you're right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I knew that Avery Brooks was kind of tall. I didn't know he was that tall.
Yeah.
And so I
Well,
was
it's
like,
real
it's standing
zoomed
on.
in on him, man. It's
Yeah,
like we got every facial reaction out of
yeah.
Avery Brooks's face in this
And
episode, in that
we
scene in
do
particular.
multiple times we get it, and we're going to get
Yeah,
into that too, because I think that Avery Brooks gives a stellar
he
performance
does.
in this
I
episode.
wanted to mention that. I'll
Yeah.
save it for later, but keep going.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Cisco is upset that he's been taken off the mission. He ends up going to the Hall Suites, where he's taking out his frustration on a punching bag, being held by Jadzia, and they're having their own little bit of banter while he's working out his frustrations. He basically, at one point, he even says, in 25 years of being on active duty, he's never been taken off of an assignment until now. So it's really eating at him that this has happened. They get Akira calls down to them, tells them that something's happened regarding Eddington. They head back to ops, and they find out that the Malinche has been, no, it wasn't the Malinche, it was
I think
some Cardassian something or another was under attack.
right.
And basically that if they had shifted the balance of power in the area, because the Malinche was the only ship now, because the Defiant was out of commission. And so now that meant that, oh yeah, they had attacked the Cardassian freighter ships that were carrying some
Certain
chemicals
chemicals,
that they were
yes.
able to turn into biogenic weapons, and they had enough materials to bomb every Cardassian colony in
Area.
the demilitarized zone.
Right.
So that effectively shifted the balance of power, because they didn't have another ship. To which Cisco says, "Oh no, we got another ship." And one of the coolest scenes, I thought, because it's like everybody instantly knew what that meant, and you could just see them like no one fought it. They just all fell in line, and everybody got
Yeah.
onto the platform to go to the Defiant.
Right.
We get to the Defiant, we find out it's in pretty bad shape. That, you know, a lot of systems just don't work at all, or they're working at half power. They
Right.
decide to use Cadet Nog as kind of the voice of communication on the ship.
Yeah.
And we get to watch a really excellent scene that's like a breakdown of how a ship is run, which you've never seen it done that way in Trek. And so there's a lot of things that if you're like me, you've probably watched this and thought of how you could do this job, right? But
Right.
then you get to see there, and like that you could live in this world, that you could be a Starfleet officer. I mean, I think that's the fantasy of every Trek fan since ever, right? But then you get to watch this breakdown that they do, and it's beautiful. It's a great scene, and again, we're going to talk about that later. But I just wanted to say that really quick. Anyway, they take off in pursuit of Eddington. The Malinche comes under fire and is basically stranded. So now it's back on Cisco to bring Eddington in. They have yet another confrontation with Eddington, thanks to Odo, who relays that he's tracked down a message that was like a Breen lullaby or something like that. And they
Right.
realize that this is kind of pointing them in the general direction of where Eddington may be hiding out.
The Breen system, or going to
Right.
attack. Actually, he's going.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or no, he's storing his chemicals. They said that's where the chemicals for the biogenic weapons were. They head in that general direction. They do end up tracking down Eddington and like one other ship. They get into a bit of a firefight. They blow up one of the ships. Eddington gets away by attacking yet another Cardassian ship and makes them have to save the Cardassian ship. He also contacts Cisco and sends him a copy of Les Miserables, and
Right.
basically starts calling Cisco Javert. And
Right.
through Cisco's reading of the book again, he realizes that while Eddington's trying to frame him as Javert, that means he thinks of himself as Valjean. So
Right.
he's living out his own little Les Miserables fantasy, because he's saying it's his favorite book. And
Right.
so Cisco kind of gets into his head a little bit and realizes that what Eddington needs is a good villain.
Right.
And he decides to become the good villain for Eddington's tale.
Right.
And after Eddington has now, by this point, he's also bombed 2 Cardassian colonies and made it to where they're inhabitable for Cardassian life. Cisco does the same thing to some Maquis colonies and poisons them so that they're inhabitable to human life.
Right.
Um, he then makes a grand announcement that he's going to do this to every Maquis colony he can come across, basically, which
Right.
then, of course, gets Eddington to be like, wait a second, like, you can't do this. You're betraying your oath. You're doing all this stuff. And Cisco's like, yeah, I don't care. I want you. I want to arrest you. So either you turn yourself in, or I'm just going to go around blowing shit up.
Right.
And so Eddington's like, okay, don't do that. If you don't do that, I will give you our biogenic weapons. And Cisco's like, yeah, no, not enough.
Right.
You.
Yeah.
To which ultimately Eddington agrees and he gets arrested. And the episode ends with Odo escorting Eddington to jail. He's,
Right.
it's all wrapped up here.
Yeah.
But that's it. That's essentially the episode. Obviously, there's a lot to talk about here, but I just wanted to give you those points. And if you want to watch it, which you should want to watch this episode. Go do that. You can watch all of them on Paramount Plus. Go watch it. You can listen to us later. Unfortunately, you won't be able to partake in any of the live stuff that we do, but you can go watch it and come back and see if you're right, if you agree, and if you don't, whatever, and leave a comment for us, and maybe we'll talk about you behind your back, or maybe on the next episode.
Right.
But that's it.
Yeah.
That's the episode. So I got to start, of course. What did you think? First time viewer, what did you think?
Yeah, this is a good episode. There's a lot of decisions that Cisco makes that I'm like, man, you're just. I mean, there's a whole like scene where I think it's before they get on the Defiant to go. Yeah, so before they get on the Defiant to go. Is it before they go leave? They're because they went to Defiant to find out how much power they had, and Cisco's walking with Dax, and he's like, "So just tell me, like, how dumb I am. I'm risking the ship, the station, my career for this vendetta." I forget what Dax says in return.
She says, "You're becoming more like Curzon
That's
all
what
the
it
time."
was. And I was like, man, I don't know if that's a good thing or not. And that's what Cisco says too.
Yes.
Yeah, I will. I just have to say that up front that I do feel like Cisco makes a lot of risk this episode, and to be fair, that's what makes for fun storytelling. And certainly, I imagine that if you're going to be, a commanding officer of any sort in the middle of a dangerous wartime situation, even if it's just skirmishes, there are times when you got to make decisions for yourself, and orders be damned. So I'm not saying that it's like all wrong, but the real problem for me is beyond all that is the damn ship is pretty well in, like, they're having to reboot all the systems, and they haven't got that all finished before Cisco's like, all right, men, charge.
Right.
Like,
So, we just watched how a scene and a half ago, O'Brien said it's going to take 2 weeks. And now here he is, and he's
24
like,
hours later.
yeah, so you want to do what with my ship now? Like, that's kind of how O'Brien was like, he says, let me give you the bad news all at once. He just listed all these things that don't work or at half power, which I thought was great.
And what's so funny about that, O'Brien doesn't ever say, like, I'm sorry, Captain, I can't do it. This ship is too badly and I can't do any of this. It's impossible. None of that snotty stuff.
That's not O'Brien's way. He's very much this is it. Here it is.
Yeah, but it's just funny that he never really gives any sort of strong sorry, Captain, like this ship it's still not operational. He's like, yeah, it's operational if you consider it like half capable of doing anything. Even the comm badges don't work.
Right.
Like, oh my gosh.
Do you want to get there? Or do you want to get there in style? I mean, there's a couple ways we can do this.
Yeah, and having Nog there relaying all the commands, which I thought the actor, I forget his name, who plays Nog,
Aaron Eisenberg.
Yeah, he's a young kid basically in these episodes still, but he was there, man. Nog is full on cadet. He is there, and it's great to see his character really grow, and he fits his role perfectly. He's, cadet, are you ready to go into a combat situation. Sir, yes, sir. All right, report to the bridge. And then he's got the comm thing, and he talks back and forth. So it was fun seeing Nog step up. But yeah, it's just when Eddington was all like, "This is all personal to you, Captain. This is a problem." Part of me was like, "Yeah, I do feel like Cisco's taking some risks that maybe he should
Oh
back
yeah.
up on."
Oh,
But
he definitely is taking a risk, and we're going to get to that particular
yeah,
decision that he makes because it's one that has been hotly contested about how Cisco committed whether or not Cisco committed a war crime. Um,
oh yeah,
I always
good
come down
point.
on the side of no, he didn't, and there's a very obvious reason for that, and we're going to get to that. But I do first think that we have to talk about that scene where they decide everything has to be announced and everything has to be we're watching them actually perform these functions, which we've always seen people do in Trek, on the Enterprise, Geordi, Data, Wesley, whomever's at the helm, just doing these things. And we understand that the technology by this point has become also rather intuitive. So there's a lot of things you don't have to just really think about or plan out. You could just do them, enter a few functions, and the ship goes, it turns, it does whatever, right? This is the first time we're seeing a full breakdown of how all that stuff works, and we're hearing them call it out. What levels things need to be set, how to actually turn the ship. That scene with Jadzia piloting the ship out and away from Deep Space Nine, and the sharp turn of the Defiant as it sailed past that pylon. Great, great stuff. And I really enjoyed it. And turns out that it's actually a homage scene, I guess, to an old, I guess technically 60s movie, even though it came out in 1958, called Run Silent, Run Deep, which I don't know if I ever talked to you about before. I feel like I have, because I've watched this movie, and you can watch it right now for free on YouTube if you want. It's a 1958 film starring Clark Gable, and it's great. It's well done. If you like kind of those, one old school black and white movies where they do the submarines, and it's everything's got to be quiet because any kind of noise can telegraph
Be
your signal
picked
to
up.
the enemy and things like that, and they're rigged for silent running and what all that means, and running drills and all that kind of stuff. It's a great movie for that. And I remember when I watched it, I watched it a couple of years ago, and then I just so happened to have watched this episode again. The way they call things out and stuff, they did a great job with translating that here in this episode. So yeah, go watch that movie as well if you want. Like I said, you can find it on YouTube for free. It's called
Mm.
Run Silent, Run Deep. So
I'll just say
yeah,
right here while you're talking about it, submarine movies. I think most every submarine movie that's ever been made is at least good. If it's not
yeah,
great, it's at least good.
yeah. I don't know what it is about them. I think it's so easy to ramp up the tension in those movies
Oh, it
because you're
is.
already underwater, you're already under pressure, and the
Yes,
dangers of
literally.
just the environment killing you, let alone fighting in that
Yeah,
environment.
yeah,
It adds another level to it. And yes, you're right. Like I can't think of a bad one that
right.
I've ever seen, unless you get into like the super ridiculous ones where it's like they're in submarines but they're fighting aliens or something. Those movies are not good. But
Right.
when it's like like The Hunt for Red October is probably
Oh
the
yeah. Hmm.
easily
U
identifiable
U
great sub movie.
71 with Matthew McConaughey. That's another one.
Yes,
Speaking of him again, heck, even The Abyss, which I saw a couple years
love
ago.
love The Abyss, even though it's
Really?
not technically a submarine movie,
Well,
but
it's
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 a great
it's set under the water, kind
yes
of.
Ed
It's
Harris.
yes.
And
Um,
it has aliens. I just said,
well, that's why it brought it to mind when you as soon as you said it. The and of course every I mean basically that's why basically Star Trek is on some level that it
mhm.
is a submarine and but not under the ocean, it's space, and yeah, it's same pressure. um how did we get talking about that? How did we get just moving onto that
Because
conversation?
that scene, it's an homage to Run Silent, Run Deep, which is
Yes,
the '60s movie with
dude, I
Clark
have to
Gable.
say, as they were leaving the station, it was hilarious. All right, I need to come about, so I'll let the momentum take me. Go up too much, and like
Too
you catch
much
it in your head,
overcorrect,
and they're
right?
just spinning. the top, and then they come back and they're heading toward the pylon, and Cisco's like, "I hope you see that pylon there,
I mean,
helmsman."
it's a great scene because it's like, again, so many times you just hear the captain like issue an order, and the officer and the equipment, they plug in the stuff and they make the adjustments, and again, a lot of it's supposed to be thought of as intuitive. The ship kind of knows what you want it to do. You don't have to have this super hard level of technical expertise, but a lot of them do have it anyway because if something breaks, you need to be able to fix it and work with it. And that's what we see here. The ship is broken. The ship is at half capacity at best. So these highly trained, skilled technical officers are able to pull this stuff off, and we hear them do it and watch it in real time. So it's a great scene to see for Star Trek. And I don't think I could sit through like a whole season of them doing that, but it would be nice if that came up a little bit more. Like, for Voyager being stranded in the Delta Quadrant, having to make a 70-year journey back to Earth, you would think there would have been maybe one or two more of scenes of them being broken down and doing those things. But no, they just hit factory reset every week. So,
yeah.
But again, great scene. And to go into other great scenes, this episode, I think, highlights why I love Jadzia Dax so much. Her relationship with Cisco in this one, fantastic example. They were great. That pairing was fantastic from beginning to end in this episode. What do you think? What do you think of our full showing of Dax here finally?
Yeah, I mean, this is definitely an episode where like we really get them together more than we have in a lot of instances. I mean,
yeah,
there was a lot of it. Again, I'll just say that I do feel like Dax is still kind of like when she says you're acting more like Curzon. It's like, okay, that is maybe a good thing, maybe not. I mean, because Curzon was a mixed bag. I mean, to be very fair to Curzon. And do we want Cisco to become Curzon or stay Cisco?
Even Cisco says, "I'm not sure how to take that." So even he's aware that it's not necessarily the compliment that she made, not fully that she wants it to be.
Right. And like the moment where he's thinking about the whole Les Miserables comparisons, I'm Le Javert, so he's Jean Valjean. And so to be very fair, the moment where he says, I guess I'll become the villain or whatever he says. The line was great. I mean, again, Avery Brooks' hands down amazing.
The voice, the menacing, the subtle menacing threat that he always gets to deliver.
Yeah, don't let Cisco talk in a low, quiet voice because that means bad things are about to happen to you.
Yeah.
But what I'm getting at is that Dax was a little slow to catch on to kind of what he was getting at, which was a little kind of a bummer in the sense that like. It wasn't like the two of them like working out this thing together. It was Cisco coming to this realization, and he's the star of this episode, and she's kind of tagging along in some aspects.
Well, I feel like she wasn't so much tagging along or even being slow to get what he was doing, more as she allows him to come to the decisions himself, but she never wavers in her support of him, and she helps him to kind of like talk through some things. Like even when in that scene where he's like, I already know what you're going to say. And he runs through the litany of things and she's just standing there. And then she tells him, she's like, actually, that's not what I was going to say, or that's not what I was thinking, and it just kind of shows that they are, well, on a lot of things, they are in step. It's just like they're slightly off just enough for them to complement each other and work well with each other. She's there with him when he's getting the breakdown from O'Brien in engineering. And it's just, I just like the way that they were paired up on a lot of this stuff. Because you're right, it's not something that we've seen a whole lot of. And for them to be the, thick as thieves friends that we're supposed to think that they are, it's weird that we don't really see them talking with each other and working through things a lot.
Yeah.
She's in the holodeck with him while he's beating the hell out of the punching bag,
Which was a fantastic scene. I want to get to that in a moment, but keep going. Just what I mentioned, I want to talk about that. Yeah,
we can do that right. I loved it because I just loved how, again, she's literally supporting him. She's holding the bag for him while he's just wailing on the thing and giving him some great feedback without actually being like, you're wrong here, or this is right, or kind of playing into his feelings or anything like that. She's just letting him kind of vent.
And to be very fair, to really nail that point home, what he says is I'm not like a changeling. I'm not an alien that's lived 7 lifetimes, but I'm still like a captain. I should have seen this happen. So he basically says both. I mean, he didn't say it to Dax directly. He didn't say, "Hey, Dax, you didn't notice." He doesn't say it's your fault. He says that like I was captain. It was my responsibility to know that Eddington was a problem, and I have no excuses. It's not. He doesn't. He's not saying that he's a changeling or he's an ancient alien. He's just saying my role required me to know these things, and I have no excuses. I don't have anything to fall back on, even if I consider Dax's ability to she's lived 7 lifetimes. Like my point is that he's not. Dax is standing there, and she could have taken that comment about living 7 lifetimes as personal, and she could have been like, "What are you trying to say? Like it's my fault?" She didn't do that. She's just letting him get his anger out. And I have to say this while we're on the subject: that scene is probably my favorite scene in the whole episode because Avery Brooks is punching that bag as hard as he can. He is not faking anything. He is yelling.
He's in it. He's absolutely in it.
He is sweating for real. That's not fake sweat. Only Patrick Stewart as Picard has ever put in as much emphasis, has ever committed to a scene in a Star Trek episode as Avery Brooks is here. I've seen Patrick Stewart, there are 4 lights. I've seen moments like that where Patrick Stewart has really committed.
We just saw him in First Contact, where he has his Captain Ahab moment and loses it.
Exactly. And so that's exactly the comparison I was thinking of making. So yeah, that it just like Avery Brooks is the captain. He's as much as Picard or anybody else. He fills the role. And I'm glad that Avery Brooks is not in any way lesser than any other captain, because I know you've mentioned before you feel like the show kind of gets put aside by people. But Avery Brooks has never once been the reason for that. If it's true, it's not his fault.
But there has been that criticism. There have been some people who have said that the reason that the show doesn't get the same kind of limelight and response is, because of the way that Avery Brooks was and the way that Sisko is portrayed. I disagree. I feel like the show would have
100%.
failed if it wasn't for the strength and the conviction that he brings to the role.
Yeah.
You couldn't have gotten that kind of, let's transpose characters for a second. If that was Picard and he had been beaten like that and was feeling so, feeling so beaten the way that Sisko was here, he wouldn't have gone to the gym and been punching it out. He would have been sitting in his office or in his quarters brooding until he figured out a clever speech to give to rally the troops and to make this thing now come out peacefully or whatever. We certainly wouldn't have got the analysis of Javert and Jean Valjean and watched him become the villain. I think he would have, even if he would have got there somehow, he might have threatened it, but I don't think that he ever would have done it. And I think that's where it's where you have to draw that clear line of distinction between those two characters. I mean, Sisko is certainly not afraid to really be, he's a fighter. And we see that here in this boxing scene. We see how he takes Eddington to task later on. It's a great scene. It's an absolutely powerful scene. And you're right, like Sisko, Avery Brooks was fully committed on that punching scene.
Yes.
He just went for it. And that is one of the things that I love about that character and that we just don't have with any of the other characters in Trek. I feel like probably the captain who probably would have got closest to this would have been Kirk.
Sure.
And but even then, I don't know if Kirk would have done it. I think that's where we also find a distinction with Sisko. Sisko crosses that line. The rest of them get close. Kirk getting the closest because Kirk was kind of reckless on some things. But yeah,
Well, with Picard as my best comparison, because I again haven't seen the original series.
yeah,
Like Picard in First Contact has a similar moment where he's been told by the high command, like, you can't go join the Borg
it's
fight,
true.
and he says, screw it, I hear the battle's going badly, I need to take action. He has a personal vendetta, as Cisco does here, and so he disobeys orders. So I want to be very clear: Cisco disobeying orders in this episode is not necessarily uncommon for a Star Trek officer to do. My only
Mhm.
problem was like, hey, the Enterprise was ready to go. I mean, it's a new ship entirely. It's peak technology, etc. The Defiant, meanwhile, has had a serious problem of all its systems going blank. So maybe give it another week. I mean, to be fair, later on we find out the other ship that they were it was in the area, was also disabled by Eddington. He's actually pretty capable of apparently
Mhm.
taking out Federation starships, which is pretty concerning, I must say. Like, they're really, you got to take Eddington down. Um, but yeah, Cisco is not the only person who has vendettas and disobeys orders, and then doesn't get reprimanded for it. I mean, at the end of the episode, no one comes to Cisco and says, "You
So
disobeyed orders, sir. You have to go to the
and
brig."
so on that point, I will say that he didn't necessarily disobey orders. He went after Eddington because of the biogenic weapon threat. So Eddington escalated, and it then became necessary for them to go.
Fair
That's why
enough.
Starfleet didn't really put up much of a fight. Then, on top of that, shortly after they departed Deep Space Nine, the Malinche was attacked and disabled. So, if he hadn't responded, there would have been no ship out there, and Eddington
Right.
would have been running around unchecked with biogenic weapons. So,
Well,
that's
to be the stick in the mud for a quick second, the other ship hadn't been disabled until after the Defiant had left, and part of what happens when they're in the plasma field is that Eddington distracts them so that he can attack the other ship, and the Defiant can't help. But that's just
yeah.
more. It's showing how Eddington turning out to be a genius. I mean, Eddington was always kind of this, goody two shoes Boy Scout type before he revealed himself. So it's
Well,
interesting to see him turn into this kind of genius of
as
machinations. And
as Odo says, one of the things that Eddington told him, the best way to hide something is in plain sight. Who
right,
suspects the upstanding security officer who's all about rules and regulations? Let's not forget that in a previous episode where Eddington was still on our side, of course, remember when they were all sitting on the bridge and they were talking about what they would do in a situation or not? And Eddington gave that whole elaborate speech about not having any feelings one way or another. He's just a humble security officer whose
I
job it
will
is
obey
to
orders.
follow. Yeah, I just follow orders. If they
I'm
tell me to
sorry I
help them,
disabled the Defiant, Captain. I was told by my superior officer that I needed to do that to
I
stop
need
you
to
from
do
doing
it.
stuff.
Right.
So he's
I'm
already
just
proven that he's capable of actually stopping the Defiant.
yeah.
It's actually
So
pretty
it's not
remarkable.
a that's true. He also has proven that he can disable the Defiant. He's one of few. So yeah, I mean he's very clever and he's obviously, almost to the just that level of being in disguise there and letting that whole assumption of all Starfleet officers are good cloak him while he does these terrible, terrible things here.
Right,
And now that he's free of all that, he is using his knowledge, his skill set to just run amok all over the place.
right.
So yeah, he's he's interesting to say the least.
Yeah.
And so now let's get to the decision, right? Eddington poisons two planets, and in response, our now villainous Cisco decides to poison two planets. This is where the controversy kind of comes in with this episode. This is the one moment where people are like, yes,
This is
Cisco created, yeah,
yeah.
committed a war crime. Um, yeah, it was just pointed out in our chat here that yes, when this episode aired, everybody was convinced that Eddington was a changeling, and that this was going to be the reveal of Eddington being a changeling. That is correct. Um, but for this decision that we're talking about here,
Uh,
um, I have always come down on the side of this is not a war crime. This is kind of a restoration of balance.
right,
Because if you remember, Eddington struck first. He escalated first. And
right,
he poisoned those two planets against Cardassian life.
Right.
Cisco responded in kind by poisoning two other planets
Right.
with against human life. And in the end
Right.
of the episode, we hear about how the Cardassians and the humans have basically
Swap
evacuated
planets.
and swapped. So balance has been restored. No, the Cardassians didn't lose two planets. The humans didn't lose two planets.
Right.
Everybody still has them. It's just now the other one can't live there for X
50
amount of
years. I
years.
think it was 50 years is what they
Well,
said.
we know it's 50 years for the ones that Cisco poisoned. We don't know
Right.
how long it was for the ones that Eddington poisoned.
Well, fair enough. I'm just pointing out that if we have any sort of indicator, 50 years
Yeah.
it was the amount of time that was said about the Cisco bombings. But yeah, no, it's I want to be very clear. Like the reasoning that Cisco gives makes sense, but
Hmm.
man, it cuts a line. It's a very thin line. Like he says that you, Eddington, you have been increasingly more dangerous and you're an instigator in this area, and so I
Hmm.
have to take drastic action to get you to stop.
That's what he says.
So I have to threaten basically threaten the Marquis in general. He says the
Yeah.
Marquis. The Marquis have been increasing. He means Eddington, but he says the Marquis. And then when Eddington says, "Okay, fine, I'll just give you my weapons," he says, "No, I need you." And Eddington's like, "Oh, of course, it's always been personal for you, Captain." Um, so that's why we get to capture him. But I mean, yeah, I mean, to be very clear, Cisco was on a ship that was partially disabled against orders, and he bombs up a human planet in order to get a result he wants. He really, I mean, wherever the line was, he was
So,
at it, leaning over and waving on the other side of that line, and
yes.
like seeing how far he could reach over it to see where he could go. But I mean, I can't say that he's wrong. I mean, he got results, and to be fair, I think the Marquis have proven to be the instigators,
So
and
let's,
sometimes,
yeah. And that's
yeah,
the other part of it too. We got to remember these people who have decided to live in this area that the peace treaty is governing. They are aware of the fact that they are right up on the edge of the frontier, and that while the Federation has its own rules and guidelines and policies and whatever in place, the Cardassians are not necessarily. I mean, they're supposed to be bound by the treaty to follow them, but you know they're not going to, or they don't necessarily have to, which is
right,
what this whole thing is about. The Cardassians frequently violating the terms of the peace treaty, or the Maquis, in this case, the Maquis, who have given up all of their sovereign rights and claims as Federation citizens. They're a rogue agency out there stirring up trouble for everybody else who is still obeying the rules and the guidelines and so forth.
right,
Eddington even says like these people, they have their homes and whatever out here, and then because of a treaty, all of a sudden they have to give up their whole planet and way of life and whatever else. And he tries to make it seem like they're just these deposed refugees who've been kicked off their land and just told, go find something else to do or whatever.
right,
But again, Cisco points out, no, they were given opportunities, and this opportunities apparently still exist to have them resettled elsewhere. We will move them elsewhere. They're
right,
not meant to live with their own, left to their own devices or anything like that. The Federation is more than willing to help them. They just have to ask for the help and accept the help. They
right,
just don't.
right,
And when they don't, they give up their rights and they become members of the Maquis. And as
right,
Cisco says, you're now becoming a growing threat. You've attacked the
right,
Malinche. Now we know that you're going to be attacking Federation starships. You have biogenic weapons. We
right,
can't just keep this on the level that it was before. You've escalated too far.
right.
Now, all of the Maquis are threats. All of the people on these colonies are potential threats. We have to end this threat now. And that's what I'm going to do.
Right. Yeah, and this while we're talking about it, this reminds me, we didn't have Calvin Hudson ever show back up ever since he was the Marquis leader in season 2. Ben's former friend. So I'm a little kind of sad that we haven't seen him much since. I don't know.
Yeah,
Do
because
you have anything to
we
say about
didn't,
him? Or
yeah, because they didn't capture Cal. He just kind of disappears for us. So this would have been a nice episode for him to return. I'm not sure why they did not bring him back for this
right,
one. Most likely with things like this, there's probably some kind of scheduling conflict. I'm sure that it was thought of.
I mean, it's been 3 seasons since, so
Yeah.
it makes sense. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, it might have been scheduling conflicts. And then I do know that the actor that they have playing the captain of the Malinche, they had actually planned a longer run with that actor. They wanted him to become a recurring character who's in the area and stays as kind of a support and backup for DS9. And
Right.
that was going to continue well on through the sixth and maybe even the seventh season. But ultimately, they couldn't get all of that to work out. So unfortunately, he and the Malinche are not seen again after this. I like that name, the Malinche. I don't know what that's from. I need to look that up to find that out. If anybody knows really quick and wants to tell me, that's cool. But I like the way they name things in Star Trek. You know, it's not often that you come across one that is so different. You know,
Right. Yeah.
yeah,
His character was interesting, especially when he goes into Cisco's office and says, "You've been taken off this assignment and been given to me." Because in part they feel like it's personal because he fooled you, is what he says.
yes.
And
If
Cisco
someone had fooled
turns
me, if
around.
someone that's what he says. If someone on my staff had fooled me the way Eddington fooled you, and Cisco gave him the death glare, the damn near blasted him through those doors,
Yeah,
and he was like,
Avery Brooks was acting the hell out of that
yeah,
turnaround. Yeah, that's that
never
same
mind.
scene where
Poor
you feel
choice of
like he's
words. Yeah,
taller than the other
and
guy.
and Cisco
Um,
grew 10 feet that day to tower over this man and scare the hell out of
yeah,
him.
it's a funny scene because like it is accurate because Cisco agrees. Well, technically he did fool me right after the guy says it. But hey, learn to be a little more tactful, bro. Come on now.
But that's another
You want to
sign
continue?
of the but that's another sign of the strength of Captain Cisco. He doesn't like what the man says, but he takes the harsh words and he's like, "You're
Right.
absolutely right. He
Yes.
did fool me." He doesn't shy away from it. He doesn't get in Captain Sanders' face or anything like that.
Right.
He's just like, "Yeah, he did. He did fool me," and that's
Right.
what I like about it because other captains would have wanted to debate that a little bit.
Right.
I could see like Captain Janeway, for example. I mean, she does take criticism, but I do feel like someone saying someone blatantly fooled her in this regard, I think that would have been one of those things that she would have reared up about a bit.
Right.
Kirk, 100%. You can't tell him somebody fooled him. Kirk thinks he's the smartest person in any room he's in, bar none. And if you tell him that someone's fooled him, that's a no-no.
Yeah.
I don't know about Picard. I feel like Picard, I don't think anybody would have said someone would have fooled him in the first place. I think they would have said something else. Because the way people treat Picard, I mean, it's almost like the man comes in the room and you're halfway kneeling before you realize you don't have to kneel.
Yeah.
It's
That's part of
weird.
his glory is he raises
Right,
you up from your kneeling position. Yeah.
right.
Yeah. Um, yeah, it's a great moment too because it pays off not only at the boxing scene, but then later at the end of the episode after the ship, which I can't remember the name of at the moment,
The
was
Malinche.
disabled. Yeah, after the Maliche is disabled, that same captain, whose name I also forget at the moment, has to ask to be towed back, just like the Defiant had to be towed back. So it shows that yes, maybe Cisco got fooled once, but he's not the only one. So, um, yeah, yeah,
So let's do a quick, obviously Cisco versus Picard because it's just so much fun.
yeah,
And we've already been doing it a little bit anyway in this episode.
sure.
Um, how do you think this would have played out if from beginning to end it was Picard?
The
Do you think we would have
fool
gotten
and everything
to,
else.
yeah. Do you think we would have had so many tense moments? I know we wouldn't have had the boxing scene for sure. That would have been something else. Like instead of the boxing scene, what would it have been for Cisco or for Picard?
So if Cisco is a hot anger, Picard is a cold anger, right? Like Picard, like I'm just thinking of like the second to last episode of TNG, which was the one where the Marquis was introduced on TNG, again with the fantastic Ensign Rowe or Lieutenant Rowe by that point, Lieutenant Rowe being the one sent to go infiltrate the Marquis, and like he's trying to convince her, and by the end of the episode, she betrays the Federation to join the Marquis. Um, Picard has that cold fury. And so I feel like, I mean, it does pop out as hot, as again, First Contact shows us. But I feel like he would have, it's hard to say, but he would have been. I mean, part of the problem is Cisco's situation is different than Picard's because Picard's already on a a massive, a very powerful starship as opposed to
Yeah, so he'd have been able to hunt him easier because he was already maneuverable.
right. Yeah,
And
like so
also
for
the Enterprise is also so much larger and more powerful.
right, and so I
The
feel
Defiant's
like
a powerful ship, but nothing like the Enterprise.
yeah. So for example, when we find out that La Minche was disabled, part of that ship looks like a starship as we expect it to look. It looks more like Enterprise. It has the pylons, etc. So part of me wonders if like is that how powerful Eddington is that he really truly can pull off a deceptive con that even maybe the Enterprise would have fallen for it and disabled the Enterprise.
Nah.
Like that's what it really comes down to is like
Well, the
would the
Enterprise has data, so no. I
that's
mean,
true. It's not Picard's fault. It's Data's
it's not
that would
necessarily.
save the day.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
if you think about a lot of it in Next Generation, I mean, that's really what it is. It's
Well,
Data
and then of course
kind of
Counselor
playing that.
Troy would have been like, "I don't sense any feelings on the ship. It's just there's no one there." Oh my god, I always thought her inclusion was the funniest part on the whole show, but she does fine. She earns her place on the show.
I feel like we could easily make some of those scenes where Cisco and Dax were talking to each other and he's kind of venting his frustrations. Those easily could have been scenes of Picard and Troy kind of going over it and him talking about that, like you said, that kind of cold rage he's got and
Right.
how he's not so much angry at Eddington for living by his convictions so much as he is disappointed that the man used the Federation the way that he did
Yeah,
and
he abused
yeah
his position. Yeah, it's interesting now that you mentioned it. We haven't really talked about. I mean, the episode's called "For the Uniform," and so yeah, Picard being the of the two captains being the more by the book type, definitely would have been kind of more like. I mean,
well
Cisco does it too. Like you betrayed.
Cisco takes it very personally.
Yes,
Picard takes it at a much more professional level. So like that's
that's
what I'm saying. The
exactly it.
distinction would have
Yeah,
been Picard would have been like, I'm disappointed you did it this way, but I can respect a man who wants to live by his own convictions. Whereas Cisco's like, no, you used your knowledge of us and how we trained you against us. You're a
right,
traitor. That's treason. And I'm
right.
bringing you in for treason. That's how he
Yeah.
looks at it.
And if I
Cisco,
have to take some drastic actions to make it
mhm,
happen, I will. Yeah.
right. And
That's the other
Picard,
question.
yeah,
Would Picard have bombed a planet to get this
no,
result?
absolutely not.
Yeah, I
I
feel
think
the
that
same way. Yeah.
Picard would have threatened it, but then ultimately he probably would have done one of his clever little wink and nods and whatever, and
Yes, that's true. Yeah.
suddenly the ship would have been surrounded by Cardassians and been like, look, you can either surrender to the Cardassians who are most likely going to kill you, or you can
Right.
come aboard my lush starship and rest comfortably
That
until we
is
get you
true.
back for your court martial.
He would have had a more diplomatic solution on some
Yeah,
level. Yeah.
yeah,
Um,
that's what
it's
that
it
would have been.
the it makes for an interesting scene because again, Vincent in the chat pointed out, Worf takes two commands from Cisco to actually do the bombing. He like looks at him, and Kira takes a moment as well to like actually, I think Kira, right, to actually like retrofit the torpedoes with whatever
Well,
it was.
he tells Worf to do it, and Worf does it. But then when he gives the order to actually fire them, Kira looks at Worf when Worf pauses,
Right.
and so that's the scene that you see is Cisco turns to Worf, makes the order, or no, he gives the order to Worf. Worf pauses, he turns around, and they all look at Worf.
Right.
Cisco, Kira, and now Worf. And
Yeah.
I think it's interesting that Kira didn't object either. Now,
Yeah.
considering the fact that Eddington has been targeting Cardassians, and we all know how she feels about them, I'm surprised that we never get to see a moment where she argues that Eddington is right, or that
Yeah.
Eddington that he has a reason to have this beef with the Cardassians on some level. Now, it could be that they feel like she's already done that because she did do this a couple of
Right.
episodes ago with Eddington or whatever. So maybe they're feeling like we don't need to rehash that. Plus, it seems like Kira has kind of, she's matured a bit, and her
Yeah, I'd
trust in
say
Cisco has deepened as well.
yeah. There's that. She's also gone to the more gray areas of like I need in order to heal with the Cardassians, I need to find ways to
Right.
like be on their side sometimes. And I forget. Like, I guess it's like, is it Kai Wynn who's the one who's kind of a, a poke at her, a thorn in her side about stuff like that. I'm trying to think. There's another character.
You mean Kaya? Well, Kaya Parker kind of came at her hard when she was still there about that, about kind of forgiving herself and
No, no,
moving
I mean like
past some of this.
no, like I can't remember if it's Kai Wynn or if there's another character who, like, even a few episodes ago was berating Kira for not. I guess no. I guess I'm thinking of Gul Dukat being more like, oh, why don't you love us Cardassians? Aren't we wonderful
Oh
and
yes,
amazing? And I'm the persona of all wonderful things Cardassian, and I can't believe you don't love me more than you do. Um,
all the
Maybe
man
that's
wants is a statue,
yeah,
just one,
yeah,
just one. He
but
wants his children to love him.
yeah,
Okay, is that so much to ask?
yes, yes, it is.
Man is absolutely certifiable, but it's
uh,
it's fantastic.
yeah, it really is.
Um,
Um, yeah,
but yeah, but I love that it did bring Worf up short. Like, and
yes,
that's, and I think it's that moment too that causes us as the audience to question it, because we hear what the order is, and I think that's why so many people blank on the fact that all he did was poison it to human life. He didn't destroy all life on the planet. He just
right,
made it to where humans can't live there.
right,
That's it.
yeah, yeah,
Um,
and
yeah,
I mean,
it's an interesting thing to do for sure. But yeah, it's
right.
it's the fact that Worf pauses that makes us clued in to the fact that
Yes.
what he's doing is
Even Worf
crossing
is
the
pausing.
line.
Worf's the one who's ready to fire torpedoes at anybody. We've seen him kind of pull the gun too quickly in certain moments. So the
Hmm.
fact that he's even backing up is interesting. Um, all right, you ready for my hot take? The hottest take of the hot takes that I've been sitting on for
Okay,
an hour. All right,
shoot, fire away. Let's hear it.
this is the hot. I'm telling you now. This is a hot take. So the thing I was thinking about at the very beginning of this episode, back when we're in the caves with the refugees, and he's looking for Eddington because it turns out his contact is going to kind of sell Eddington out, and it turns out Eddington's got the jump on Cisco instead. But in that conversation they have, they Eddington is presenting the case of why the Maquis are right. The Federation abandoned these people. They had set up homes, and then the Federation told them to leave, and then all that. And we've heard it before, but Cisco says, it's not that simple. And he says, you're giving these people false hope. You're telling them that they can have what they lost back, and you're causing them to believe in a false hope that's causing all these problems. All right, here's the hot take. And I'm not saying this is an exact one-for-one comparison, but for me, in that moment, what I was thinking about was what's going on in the Middle East right now with
Oh yeah,
Hamas.
yeah.
For
I
me, the Maquis and Hamas are the ones I'm thinking of, because I feel like Hamas is the ones that are promising the Palestinians, like, we're going to take back all this land that you feel you've lost. And it's been over 50 years since. And if you want to, I have my opinions about that conflict. But my feeling in the moment is that's exactly right when he says you're giving them false hope. In some ways, the best way to move forward is to accept the unfortunate status quo and not use violence, but try and find peace through diplomacy or other ways. Now, again, this is not a one-for-one comparison. If you start doing one-for-one comparisons, then you start
yeah, yeah.
finding the problems in that comparison.
Yeah, you're definitely gonna find a lot of issues there.
Yes,
I have
not at
to
all.
admit that when I started watching this episode again, I did initially think of the same thing, only
Right.
mine was the reverse. So,
Fair
but
enough.
I
Fair
thought that
enough.
I thought the same thing. I was just like, okay, we're like, you're fighting over something. It's already happened. There have been multiple treaties. They lived with this for so long. Why all of a sudden is there this huge, all the battling and all that stuff? It's like these are things that at this point, the best thing you can do is, you're, instead of holding on to generational um, anger or whatever that is, letting
Right.
that go and finding a way to move beyond it here.
Yeah.
It's not like you're still actively being subjugated or oppressed or whatever. You had a stable-ish system, and then you decided to balk the system for
Right.
whatever reason. So,
Yeah.
um, yeah, I had the same thoughts. I didn't want to necessarily say it. I know this, especially what's going on right now. It's a hot button issue. There's as many. It seems like there's as many people on the side of the Palestinians as there are on the side of the Israelis. I have not looked into it enough to have a 100%. This is the side that I'm on. I look at both and I kind of go, you know what? Well, that kind of makes sense. And I'm like, oh, you know what? That kind of makes sense. So it's just, and
Yeah.
as an outsider, I don't feel like I'm qualified to judge
Right.
their living situation and what they've got going
Well,
on.
and the one thing I want to be clear when I say that, like the Marquis, as Eddington says, they're not killers, which is a very interesting take because we've seen them kill people
Oh
before.
yeah, they killed people plenty of
I was
times.
like, what are you talking about?
This is
But
that kind
he's
of
like,
revisionist history, maybe.
yeah, he's like, no, I just bomb planets in such a way that they have to evacuate the entire planet.
Or
It's
as
like,
he did to the guy, we just maroon them on planets for the rest of their lives. So I didn't
yeah,
kill him; he's just gonna
yeah,
die there.
yeah,
So
exactly. So yeah, thanks for your mercy. And I just want to be very clear. I'm not saying that Hamas is like, oh yeah, we're not killers. No, they killed some people. So I'm not making a 1-for-1 comparison. I'm just using it as a
well,
comparative
and I mean,
thing
and
here.
again for the equality of the statement, the Israelis have killed people too. So
Yes.
it's both sides. I'm just gonna just stop there because I don't want to offend anybody because
Exactly. Yes.
I'm not
It's
as
just
knowledgeable on the
this.
situation. But
Ex-
it's in the news. It's on our
yes.
minds. We saw a parallel.
And
There it
what I'm
is.
really getting at here in particular is that the Marquis situation, all of it, from the Cardassian perspective all the way down to the Federation perspective and everything in between, it feels realistic. This
Yeah.
feels like a realistic issue that might actually come up. Two warring factions. They have a demilitarized zone, and the people left there feel abandoned, feel like they need to defend themselves, turn to violence on some level, and that causes issues for both
Yeah.
sides of the conflict. One side of the conflict seems to be upholding their side of the agreement, even if people don't like it. The other side seems to be trying to undermine it, and therefore that's why the demilitarized zone people feel like they have to protect
Or
themselves. It's a great conflict in this
yeah.
fictional universe,
Or even
which is
if even just not necessarily that the other side is not agreeing to it. It's this third party that's kind of made up of. It seems to be the majority of one side, but they've disavowed themselves. They are their own group. They just happen to be made up of the people who came from this one particular side.
right,
And so that's what's causing the issue because then you have the one group, in this case, the Cardassians, who are blaming the Federation. The Federation's like, but they're the Maquis. They're not a part of us, but we're still catching their heat. And that's
right,
why the Maquis falls under, that's why the Federation feels the need to police them,
right.
which in this analogy, I guess, so Hamas would be that third grouping there that's kind of out there doing things and everybody's, blaming Palestinians at large, but they're like, well, we're not all a part of this particular group.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
So, yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. It's again the nuanced situation feels realistic.
Oh yeah, they did a
So
great
I like
job of pulling from, and even for a show that was 30 years ago. I mean, they did a great job of pulling from real world inspiration to
that. Right.
make this story on the larger scale work. As we've already pointed out, the more you get into the details and take apart your world building, you're going to see things fall apart. We don't have to worry about that in this episode, but yeah, for this broad stroke, they did a great job on this one. And
Right.
when you break it down, it's about Cisco and Eddington, and these two got people who are, they want you to think of them as two sides of the same coin, but they're really not.
Right.
They are quite different individuals, and we get to see, how they, mess with each other in such a fantastic way. And once
Right.
again, yes, Avery Brooks does a fantastic job in this episode. Love it. Just love it.
Yeah. The one last thing that we should talk about before we finalize is the hollow communicator. Is that the name
The
of the thing?
holographic communicator, the holo projecting
Yeah.
communicator, whatever the hell.
It was fun to see. I feel like it's a great addition. It's you have an actual person there. It's just funny though because Cisco's sitting on his captain's chair like a throne, and he's talking with whoever he's talking with. The other person has to stand, but I'm seeing the other side of that conversation where hello. Captain Cisco or hello Emperor Palpatine. It kind of feels like that might be how it looks from the other
The
side.
slow turn, and he comes into focus
Yes,
on the
he's got
bridge.
his hands all
Yes.
steepled. Oh man, funny. And then the one problem I also have with those moments is like, especially when Eddington was there. He's like telling, like, hey Worf, like, do the bombing, do the thing, do the shooting, and as opposed to like, hey, don't let Eddington hear me. He's like letting Eddington hear him, which to me is like, doesn't that like
I think
undermine
there was.
any?
Well, I don't think he was trying to not let Eddington hear him. I think it was the whole
True.
point was to make sure that he was aware that he was following through with the threat because Eddington calls his bluff, and so he wants him to hear
But
that
there are
he's not
other
bluffing.
moments, I guess I'm thinking of, like
Yeah.
earlier on when, like when Eddington first like turns around and comes at them, and other
Mhm.
moments because there are like at least three scenes where Eddington pops up in that little
Yeah.
hollow communicator. So it was fun though because I mean I assume
It's
they actually had the actor there in that scene in that moment,
yeah,
like they
yeah.
weren't
No, he's
faking
really
that at
good.
all.
Yeah,
That's really
he's yeah.
yeah,
Well, so the interesting little backstory about that is, Ron Moore, writer director for Deep Space Nine and Battlestar Galactica, he really pushed for this bit of technology to be used because he felt that it didn't make sense that they were still using view screens, considering they had started using view screens, in the 23rd century with Kirk and all of them. And
right.
he's like, so basically, you mean to say that our technology has not improved at all? We
When
have a
we already
better way
have
of doing
hollow
this, right?
technology as is, and yeah,
And
makes
he said
sense.
that, filming those view screen scenes was very difficult. And when you have a kind of back and forth, the way that they were doing with Eddington here, it would have been more tedious to try to film those with the screen, and that also it added a level of tension because you were thinking
Yeah,
that the two guys were in the same room, and
right,
it kind of, even though they're technically not, it
right.
did help to make the feeling of the danger and the threat a bit more
Yeah, he's
realistic.
right there. I could just grab him
Yeah,
by the throat and just choke him out
right.
or something. Yeah,
He's not a big face on a screen. He's there in the room. He's so close you could almost touch him. You
right.
know. But there was a lot of pushback on the use of the holographic projector because the feeling is it takes away from one of the key elements of what Gene Roddenberry wanted for Star Trek, which was basically filming the show and keeping to a certain budget. And by using a view screen, it does allow you to get more out of your budget because you can kind of fill things in and post editing and whatever else. And
Oh,
you don't have
okay.
to pay for an actor to necessarily be on set that same day and all the other kind of stuff.
Right.
But but I agree. I think that it's nice to see a progression of some technology. We know that things change, and
Right.
so that's no more true just because it happens to be the 24th century. It doesn't mean they've reached the apex of technology and it's never going to change again. We
Right.
should see an evolution and outgrowth of certain frequently used technology, like we would assume the view screen is.
Right.
So yeah, I liked it, and it also becomes kind of a running joke because it's mentioned a couple of times on other Trek shows as to why they don't have one, and when the technology went into practice. So I think that's funny. Like the Strange New World show and Discovery both make references to having attempted it, but then it caused a catastrophic failure, and so they just gutted the whole system and never touched it again. So it's like this technology that's actually a couple hundred years old, and they just don't like it, and now they've brought it back. And here comes O'Brien being like, "Oh, the holographic communicator I installed works perfectly."
Yeah, it's
So
true.
it's fantastic.
Yeah. Yeah. I do like the addition of it. Frankly, I think it does make sense in
Yeah.
the technology of the world as we know it at this point. Um, I do feel like I still want to see this view screen sometimes. Like it
Oh,
like
they're not. It's not going to go away. I'll tell you right
yeah,
now, the view screen does not go away. I mean,
right,
because in other episodes, the view screen makes sense. But yeah, there's going to be other times that come up where the hollow projector is back. So
Got it. Okay.
that's
All right.
there's your spoiler. There's your the
Oh
one on
boy.
we see this technology again.
Yeah.
Okay, so
Speaking of spoilers, this is the halfway point of season 5, man.
all right,
Yeah, we got like
moving right along.
me and my roommate were calculating. We probably have about a year, maybe a year and a half left of episodes left to record. So,
Are you already trying to figure out ways to get rid of me, David? Is that what this is? Are
well,
you
how did
counting
you figure
down,
me out?
counting down to when you never have to talk to me again? I
Well,
see how it is.
I thought when you quit our job that one time that was the end of you, but nope, not anymore. Learned that lesson long ago.
No, I hated the job. I didn't hate you.
Yeah, you drove to see me right away. So.
Yeah. Well, you were around the corner. In all fairness.
Yeah, yeah, that was funny. I was like, Perry, it's the middle of the day. What are you doing?
I was like, yeah, I quit. That's what I'm doing here. I quit.
Oh my
So,
gosh.
well, I think that's going to do it for us on this dynamic episode of Star Trek Deep Space Nine. Real quick, just to give you some heads up here. Apparently, they are full go on the Section 31 movie. They have not had a release date yet, but they have said that initial filming has begun. So hopefully we will hear about more of that soon. Strange New Worlds has also gone into production on its upcoming season. So again, that show will probably be coming out next year by the way they do their filming. The final season of Discovery is set to come out in April of this year. There's already a lot of hype about it. They're going to actually drop the first episode at Comic-Con, I think they said. So you might be able to catch that if you go to those or anything like that. No word yet on the return of Lower Decks. Prodigy is set to return on Netflix at least for one season. One more season, I should say. And you can catch all of Prodigy on Netflix. You can't watch it on Paramount for some strange reason. No one seems to know why. As for all the other treks, you can definitely watch those on Paramount Plus if you have a subscription or whatever. And that's where you can, that's where I watch this show or Deep Space Nine anyway. As for us, you can find us and follow us anywhere you happen to do your social medias. And you can listen to us anywhere you happen to listen to podcasts. I do it on Spotify. So guys, until next week, take care of yourselves.
Thanks, guys.